If you can hear my voice, then it has to be a great morning because that means you woke up. And we don't minimize the uh, the lack of a great morning for others who are going through their trials and tribulations, their problems, their sicknesses, their illnesses, those who are shut in, those who are in hospitals, those who are going through their everyday struggles. We pray for them and we honor them and we respect them and we humbly come together and cast out spirits for their spirit to be lifted up. But today I wanted to come to you all because today, 7 years ago, the United States Supreme Court decided a case. It was a groundbreaking case. The case was known as Montgomery versus Louisiana. And Montgomery versus Louisiana was a case that was decided by the United States Supreme Court that said that anyone under the age of 18, they are considered a juvenile, who was sentenced to mandatory life without parole for a crime that was committed prior to the age of 18. If they were given a life without parole sentence, then that sentence is unconstitutional. That's what the United States Supreme Court said 7 years ago. Actually, it was in 2012 that they said it, but states refused to acknowledge that that case applied to prisoners who had already been serving time. They said that that case only applied to the new guys coming in. Well, United States Supreme Court turned around in 2016, January 25th, and they said that case applies to everybody. Almost along the lines of what Martin Luther King said, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, right? That's kind of what they said because they said this threat to justice today is the same threat to justice that existed yesterday. So, in other words, Louisiana, Montgomery versus Louisiana, the groundbreaking case of 2016, determined that juvenile lifers shall have a mitigation hearing. That mitigation hearing means that we would go back to court and the court would hear our background. They would hear how we was brought up, the schools we went to, our teachers, any problems we had in the home. The court had to know this information before they could sentence us to life without parole in prison. Because some of us had some tumultuous, some terrifying and horrifying, traumatizing upbringings. So that's the case of 2016. So we celebrate this day as former juvenile lifers. We celebrate this day with an annual rally in downtown Detroit at the court building. So we will be at the court building today. We will start at the juvenile center, which is directly across the street from the court building, or diagonally across the street from the court building. We will convene there at 1 o'clock today. And this picture that you see behind me, I put this picture behind me to tell a story because it was raining this day, it was drizzles of snow, and we were still out there. And every year on January 25th, that we have this annual celebration press conference slash rally, it's obviously going to be cold because we're in the depths of winter right now. But we can't allow this inclement weather to dictate how we fight for our rights. We can't allow this weather to dictate our fight to free others who have not benefited from the groundbreaking case of Montgomery versus Louisiana. There are so many prisoners throughout the United States, in Michigan in particular, who are not out of prison yet, who have not had that death sentence lifted off them yet. These brothers and sisters behind me on this picture, in the black coat, which is to my left, he served 27 years. The one in the blue raincoat served 31 years. The one in the back, the tall one in the back, he served 24 years. The female with the orange hair, she served 29 years. The brothers next to her in the back, he served 29 years. The brother with the umbrella, he served 26 years. The brother behind him, he served 34 years. Uh, and myself, I served 28 years. All of us benefited from the United States Supreme Court case, Montgomery versus Louisiana, because it said that we were entitled to the same benefit that all juvenile lifers were entitled to under Miller versus Alabama, which said that it is unconstitutional to sentence a juvenile to mandatory life in prison. That's what it said. It is unconstitutional to sentence a juvenile to mandatory life in prison. So, obviously, if it's unconstitutional to sentence a juvenile to mandatory life in prison, and we was serving life in prison, then this meant that we had to be resentenced. And now, the reason why I'm speaking to you today, one of the many reasons, is to garner support for the brothers and sisters who have not been resentenced yet, who are still serving that death sentence. They're still serving that death sentence for a crime committed when they were 14 and 15 and 16, 17. They're still serving a death sentence. Chicago struck down the death penalty for juveniles in, I want to say it was 2008. They struck down a death penalty. Well, a life without parole sentence is the death penalty. That means that you will die in prison. That means that there's no chance for you. There's no light for you. There's no freedom for you. There's no mercy for you. You will die in prison because you are serving a life without parole sentence. So, we fight. We fight because we want to see fair sentencing for all, whether you're a juvenile or not. We want to see fair sentencing, but particularly with juveniles whom the United States Supreme Court has said that it is unconstitutional to sentence a juvenile to mandatory life without parole in prison. We fight for them because we understand, us brothers and sisters who've been there, we understand how it feels to have a death sentence on your back. We had a death sentence. I was sentenced to die in prison. Yes, to die. I wasn't sentenced to live in prison. I was sentenced to die in prison. I wasn't sentenced to one day get out of prison. I was sentenced to die in prison. The only way I'd leave that prison was in a box. And it is so disrespectful and so utterly and blatantly corrupted and so disrespectful that they would, after they have gotten all of the years out of a prisoner, they have subjected this prisoner to health conditions and all of these traumatic experiences. After that prisoner perishes in prison, now they want to give the prisoner to the family and say, you could cover the cost to bury him. Listen, I stand before you today, imploring you, encouraging you to attend our rally today. It doesn't matter, rain, sleet, or snow, we out there. Why? Why are we out there in the rain, sleet, or snow? Knowing that the weather patterns have been unpredictable, first of all, but it's freezing cold out there. We understand that. But we also understand that there's people in prison dying. People in prison dying right now because no one is fighting for them. And guess what? I was one of those prisoners who was dying in prison. I was dying. I had that death sentence. I had the death penalty. Michigan's version of the death penalty is life without parole in prison. I had that death penalty. And it was because of people who stood out in the freezing winter cold, snow, rain, in the freezing rain, It is because they fought in these weather conditions to free us. They didn't allow the weather to dictate their fight for the freedom of those who couldn't physically be out here to fight for themselves. They didn't allow those weather conditions to determine how they were going to fight for the freedom of those who could not fight for themselves. They didn't allow the weather to dictate how they would voice and be the voice for those who were voiceless. How they would defend those who were defenseless. They fought. Our people fought for rights. Our people fought for rights. They were sprayed with water hose, chewed up by dogs, beaten with billy clubs, beaten with racist fists, beaten down with words of aspersion. They fought though. They didn't give up the fight because of the conditions around them, because they knew that the conditions could not possibly dictate the fight that they were in. They knew that if they came together and fought under whatever the conditions may be, those conditions would become obsolete. They knew this. And this is why I have this picture behind me showing you that the weather was obsolete. We didn't care about it being freezing winter cold. There was times when, yeah, our hands was cold and we got hand warmers and all of that. But we was out there because we're trying to get those brothers and sisters who are on the inside, who are deserving of a second chance. We're trying to get them that second chance. So I need anyone, I need anyone to come join hands with us. We're not just fighting for the rights of those juvenile lifers who are still serving that death sentence. Listen, we're fighting for everybody's rights. We're fighting for fair sentencing across the board. Because there's some young brothers that the courts have given 100 years to. But yet we don't even, statistics show that our lifespan is but 60 to 67 years. But you're giving a man 100 years in prison, 200 years in prison. Is that fair? You're giving a man 6, 7 life sentences. Is that fair? You're telling a guy who was 14, a boy, let me put it right, a boy who was 14. You're telling a boy who was 15, 16, 17, that the choice that he made, the bad decision that he made when he was just a little boy. I know I have the music playing in the background, you all. I'm doing this because I'm vibing with this music. So I don't own the rights to the music that I'm playing in the background either. But for those who really understand what it means to fight for your freedoms, and especially anyone with this skin tone, well, a little bit darker, but you know what I mean. Anyone with this skin tone should know what it means to have to fight every day for your own humanity. But imagine being 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Imagine not even being able to buy a cigarette, not being able to buy liquor, not being able to get into a club, many clubs, not being able to do many things except get a life sentence without parole. That's the only thing that United States offer to underage people is life without parole. You can't do anything. You can't, as I said, you have to be a certain age to get licensed. You have to be a certain age to buy liquor. You have to be a certain age to buy cigarettes. You have to be a certain age to do this. You have to be a certain age to do that. But you don't have to be a certain age for them to give you that life without parole sentence. For them to give you that long indeterminate sentence. Now, the reason, and I'm not going to hold you all up long, maybe 20 minutes. And the reason for United States Supreme Court decision in Miller versus Alabama in 2012, because it was based on world-renowned brain scientists who said, determined throughout their studies, they have found that the brain does not continue, does not stop growing until the age of 26. This means that someone who's growing up, all his brain does not stop growing until the age of 26. So therefore, we're going to make decisions that may be immature, uninformed, emotional, impulsive. We're going to make these decisions all the way up to about the age of 26 when we really don't, because we really don't grasp life. We really don't grasp the idea of responsibility, taking responsibility and accountability. We really don't grasp what it means to understand the decisions we make. We can't appreciate those decisions and understand what appreciation means. See, when you appreciate something, that means you acknowledge it, you understand it, you feel it. But when you don't appreciate something, that means you're kind of ignorant to something. You can't appreciate it. I'm kind of ignorant to it. I really don't know. That's all ignorance is the lack of understanding or knowledge of something. I don't know. So a child, an unformed brain, an immature brain, because the brain does not stop growing until the age of 26. So all the way up to 26, the brain is unformed, which means uninformed. The brain is immature. The brain is immature. It is in its child state. So bad decisions made during this period is childish behavior. So if my bad decisions are considered childish behavior, then how could you condemn a child to death for a bad decision that he made with his childish behavior? He may have picked up a gun and shot someone, sold drugs, used drugs, stole from someone. It's still childish behavior. You can't take away from the fact that he was a child. She was a child. Now, let's get to the nuts and bolts of it. Why did that child make that life-altering decision? Let's go to his history. Let's go to her history. Let's find the average case in the so-called black household of trauma, drug abuse in the home, uh, sex abuse in the home, physical abuse in the home, the fear that exists in the home, the poverty that exists in the home, the mental illness that exists in the home. How about these things? That tells the real story of that young person growing up And that young person's mindset that causes that young person to do things that other people may deem wrong. But I would say, how should his or her actions be right who have no rule over their life? How? How could you condemn a person who don't even understand life, who is still in a childish state of mind, who is acting out of trauma, who is acting out of pain, who is acting out of anger and frustration, who is acting out of poverty? How? How can you do that? So now we have to come together as a community to fight for the rights of those young people who are incarcerated serving a death sentence for a crime committed when they were just a child, when they were uninformed, could not appreciate, had a diminished culpability or diminished capacity. That simply means that they did not even have the brain power to fully understand what they was doing. So diminished culpability comes from the term diminished capacity. Diminished capacity means that you have a less capacity of brain activity to appreciate some some act or decision that you may make. So you cannot and we cannot condemn a child to death for no behavior acted out as a child. No child is born bad. No child is born a criminal. I use this, I compare this to a person with cancer. No one woke up and said, I want cancer today. I compare this to the drug user. A drug user didn't say, I want to be a drug addict today. No one woke up wanting to be sick, imprisoned, on with the death penalty. No one woke up with any of these things. These things came along with the diminished capacity that they live with. So we become a product of our environment because we live in an environment full of trauma, crime ridden, violence ridden, drug abuse in the home. And so we pick up these psychological traumas that deforms our brain activity, that retards our growth. Retard means to stunt our growth. So please excuse me for the lack of term that I'm about to use because I mean it in no derogatory way. I just mean it in a mental health sense. The average child in the so-called black environment, impoverished environment, we suffer from retardation. Why? Because most of us never have a chance to be a child due to the conditions that we live up under. Most of us have suffered some type of sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, some type of abuse. Most of us have been bullied. Most of us have been left hungry, no food on the table. Most of us wore dirty clothes, hand me down clothes. Most of us found ourselves in fights in school and decided to just skip school because we was tired of being hurt. We was tired of being traumatized. We leave home to go to school. We leave a home of trauma to go to school where we're more traumatized. So this is what we suffer. This is what we suffer as young people. Uh, so I'm doing this podcast right now because I want to encourage our community, our society to understand that we suffer as youth. We suffer a trauma that these people on the outside of this life that we live, that we're forced to live, they don't see, they can't understand, they can't even imagine the trauma that we suffer in impoverished community and disenfranchised. Why do you think they call it a disenfranchised community? Why? Disenfranchised. Look up the word. Disenfranchised, impoverished, low income. Why is these terms applied to communities that we live in? Think about that. Disenfranchised. That's unstable. Unstable. They say we came from humble beginnings. Remember, there was a time when we say, no, we was just broke. We was poor. Now they say humble beginnings. Because they try to dress it up. They try to dress up our history of poverty, of pain, of trauma, of being the victims of racism. They try to dress that up with fancy words such as humble beginning. No, we was broke, we was poor, we was traumatized, we was hurt, we was in pain, we was unloved, we was hated, we was emotionally gone, dead, spiritually lost, physically endangered. So listen, y'all. I'm not gonna hold y'all up any longer. I think that the message has been given. Please don't kill me. I'm just a messenger. I'm just a I'm just a vessel of the truth that the message was put in to deliver this message to y'all. If you're mad at me, you got to be mad at God because I'm only doing God's work. If you're mad at me, take it up with God because I'm only doing his work. He sent me to do a work. I'm out here doing the work. Everyone has a reason for living. Everyone has a purpose in life. And my reason for living, my purpose in life is to see to it that we all enjoy the freedom, our natural born freedom that God gave us. Peace and love to those within the sound of my voice, but those who did not hear the sound of my voice, I say pass along the message because someone needs to be inspired. And before I go, I want to give thanks, honors, and great gratitude to organizations such as Michigan Liberation, who I work for, uh, Rising Sun Inc., that's JMO X and his constituents. I want to give Nation Outside. I want to give thanks to Silent Cry. I want to give thanks to my organization, the Great Minds Project 5.0, Good Heart Youth, the Great Minds Project, and all these organizations that's out here putting in the work and for the rights of fighting for the rights of brothers and sisters who are inside the prison gates, who are trying to get out the prison gates. And I'm just gonna leave y'all with this. Hopefully you can hear it.